This is why you do things that you know you don't want to be doing. So essentially why you can't control your own behavior sometimes, and why you have the sensation of, why did I just do that? I know I want to stop doing this. Why do I keep doing this? So there's a really good reason for this. And this exists in many different ways. Two examples I can give is it exists in the kind of concept of binge eating versus restricting. So having those two opposites. It also exists in people pleasing and then getting really angry. So I'm going to focus on that one as an example. So this is called polarization. And the idea is that we have parts of ourselves that are opposite. And so oftentimes when this happens, people think that in order to control this behavior, they really need to embody the part that is like the good part. So in the case of binge eating and restricting, people often think that the restricting part is the good part. In the case of people pleasing versus having anger outbursts, it's the people pleasing part that's the good part, right? It's the part that they want to have. And then the other part is this part that comes out of nowhere, and you're so traumatized that like you do these things and you can't figure out how to stop. Like you want that part to just not exist at all. And that's the problem. So this is often why we can't solve it, is because we want that part to not exist. But the reason that that part exists, like the anger outburst part, is because you are too polarized in the people-pleasing part. And what that means is that you've essentially gone way too far down the spectrum of people-pleasing, that now you need to have the opposite reaction in your mind in order to compensate. And so the way to solve this is actually not to wish that the kind of bad part goes away and to wish that you only had the good part. The way to solve this is to integrate. And so oftentimes what happens is that these parts don't even like talk to each other. They're not aware of each other. They exist in completely different worlds. And so if you are someone that kind of engages in people pleasing, you'll often have this sensation that you kind of have this like hope for the best game plan to life, where it's like, I'm just going to keep people pleasing and I'm going to, try to be as good of a person as possible. But then for whatever reason, you'll have this like huge anger outburst and you'll be like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? And the reason for this is because you're people pleasing to the point in which your psyche like feels like it needs a defense mechanism. And the anger outburst is your defense mechanism. And so to solve this, you need to integrate somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. And so if you consider that people pleasing is on one side of the spectrum, and then anger outbursts, where it's like you're just like yelling at someone, is on the other side of the spectrum, what would allow you to stop doing these behaviors is to integrate in the middle. And so this can be tricky because oftentimes you've existed on opposite sides of the spectrum for a long time. It's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde phenomenon. And even in that story, they weren't really aware of each other. And so the way to figure this out and the way to stop doing this unwanted behavior, which is like the opposite of what you want, is to integrate. And that's going to look like figuring out how you can establish those boundaries that the anger part wants, but also how you can maintain those relationships and help people that the people pleasing part wants. And to figure out like what is each of these parts afraid of, because usually the people pleasing part is afraid that people aren't going to love me, they're not going to value me if I don't say yes to these things, if I don't help them all the time. And the anger part is afraid that I'm going to be taken advantage of, or I'm just going to be like kind of sucked dry from all of these things I'm doing for other people and no one's even going to notice. And that's a valid fear. Like both of these are valid fears. So it's deciding for yourself and using trial and error to figure out like, okay, where is the healthy medium for me? Like where is this kind of healthy, like part of the spectrum that will allow me to feel like I am helping people and bringing them value, but at the same time, I'm taking care of myself and I'm establishing some healthy boundaries where I don't feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And this is obviously a process, but it's going to help you finally integrate those parts. And that's how you're going to be able to really have that self-control that you're seeking. And it's going to help you also understand yourself, because in my experience, a lot of us who have these polarizations, we feel like we're almost like going crazy. Like, why is this happening? Why can't I stop it? And it's because it's essentially like a psychological immune like defense that has been created against one of the polarizing parts. And so in the case of binge eating, oftentimes that binge eating is created against that restrictive part, because the mind feels like the restrictive part is so restrictive that it's just gone too far and it feels like it needs to kind of compensate the other way. So comment below if you have other examples that you've seen of polarization, maybe something you're struggling with, and I can address them in the comments. These are just the two examples off the top of my head, but I know that polarization exists in so many ways in all of us. And so let me know if you've seen this in someone else or in yourself, and kind of what the polarization you think is.